Midnight Motorist is one of the questions that remain outstanding. No one has been able to understand the context behind this minigame for so long. Why are there footprints outside? What does the later that night mean? Why is the car purple? So many questions in what seems to be such a simple minigame. Though, what if I were to tell you that we can say that Midnight Motorist isn't what it seems? What if I told you it's a story with red herrings left and right, all to depict a red herring in universe? What if I told you we solved Midnight Motorist? Before we get into any of the nitty-gritty, I would like to clarify, I am aware of the leaks surrounding the new Tales from the Pizzaplex book, B72. And how it could fit in a Midnight Motorist. But this theory was constructed before that leak came out, and in this video, I will not be using it as evidence, as I really haven't looked into it yet. Now with that out of the way, let us continue. Midnight Motorist is one of the 3 Pizzeria Simulator minigames that stand out, alongside Fruity Maze and The Security Puppet, 2 games that depict Afton's murders in perfect light, showing what he did to get into the position we see him inside Pizzeria Simulator itself. First, let's take a look at the Security Puppet minigame. This minigame perceives Charlie's death straight out to the player, literally showing us what happened frame by frame, showing that Afton drove up to Charlie and outright slaughtered her and left her to rot in the back alley. Next, we have Fruity Maze, a minigame where we presumably play as Susie, the child who possesses Chica. We know she possesses Chica thanks to the gravestones in Pizza Sim's Lore Keeper ending, and how they conveniently line up with the animatronic heads we saw all the way back in FNAF 3's ending. While the story in Fruity Maze isn't as clear as the Security Puppet, we can still deduct what the context is. Susie's dog had died, so Afton jumped in and took advantage of the situation and told her, Then, finally, Midnight Motorist, the black sheep of the bunch. The one that has driven every FNAF theorist up the wall and into a status of eating newspaper and writing on walls. When I sat down to discuss this with a few of my close friends, I had originally thought this minigame was depicting the controversial divorce of the Afton household. But, much to my thanks, my good friend Joe Doughboy stepped in to point me in the right direction. Joe and I discussed the possible idea that has been floating around the FNAF community for some time, that the FNAF high school minigames were depictions of Afton's murders. Though skeptical, I looked further into this possibility, only to find an outlying piece of evidence, the one that people took for granted all these years. The dog.
He'll be mine by the end of the day. I just know it. I told him that someone ran over his dog in front of my house. But once he's there, I'll entice him with warm cookies, lure him inside, invite him inside.
While, yes, this was only a small portion of evidence to go off of, this piece is what I needed to give me hope. Joe and I looked further into these cutscenes, trying to figure out if anything made sense. That's when we see something interesting. The first high school cutscene shows us Toy Chica luring a boy to help her with her homework. Now compare that to the last one and how it's more violent, and has Toy Chica throwing this guy into the back of her car after hitting him in the head with a shovel. The first one is seemingly innocent in comparison. I believe that this first cutscene is depicting Charlie's murder, and how it's more innocent than the later ones due to it being Afton's first. Now, I know what you're thinking. Zipper, how can the Toy Chica cutscenes prove that Charlie's death is the first, when in the same game, Wither Chica says this?
I was the first. I have seen everything.
To that I say, yes, Susie was the first to bite the dust of the MCI. Charlie's death takes place on a completely different day. That's why Charlie's death has always been separated from the rest. We can look at how in the cutscenes, the first 2 cutscenes play out exactly the same, with Toy Chica mentioning there being another guy before the current one. These 2 take place on 2 different days, but the second one onward takes place on the same day, the MCI. Notice how as the cutscenes progress, the light outside grows darker, except for the last one. The last one stands out because the last one is Cassidy. Susie wasn't the first victim overall. Susie was the first victim of the MCI, after Afton got his bloodlust and went on a kitty slaughter spree. With this newfound perspective, I buckled my seatbelt and set out to look for more hints in the high school cutscenes of Ultimate Custom Night, trying to find evidence in the games that could possibly link back to the UCN cutscenes. And that's when I came upon this.
I told him to come over later. That should be enough. And if he doesn't show up, I'll just go to his house. And if he doesn't open the door, I'll just find a window. Chimney's always an option. Or I could set the house on fire and wait for him to run out.
Oh my dookie fart. Toy Chica calls out here that if the boy she's talking about doesn't listen to her, she's gonna break in and take him. Isn't it strange how there's footprints standing outside a broken window in Midnight Motorist? And how Toy Chica specifically calls out a window here? And how there's a trail of 2 footprints running off into the woods? Seems to me that whoever these footprints belong to ran away from something dangerous. We can also take a look at how the light outside in the high school cutscene has shifted to a darker setting later that night. Need more proof? If so, I would like to call your attention to the Fazbear Frights books, specifically a little story called Find Player 2. Now before I dive into this, I can hear you typing your angry comment about how the books aren't canon. And yes, I 100% agree with your statement. They aren't 100% canon. The games and books won't fit one-to-one, but rather share attributes and repeating themes that can help us determine what the game's overall story is. As the man himself said back when the Silver Eyes novel came out, it doesn't mean they were intended to fit together like 2 puzzle pieces. So with that out of the way, let us continue. In this story, a young girl named Amy and her quite obnoxious friend Mary Jo are visiting Freddy's and come across a strange, creepy man staring at them. The 2 girls tell him off and Mary Jo drags Amy to play the hiding maze game. While midway through the game, the creepy man from earlier continues staring at Amy from outside the hiding maze. Freaked out, Amy leaves and ditches Mary Jo, leaving her. Time skip to present day. Amy insists that the man killed the now missing Mary Jo, and upon hearing his release from prison, tracks back to her hometown to figure out the truth once and for all. Upon her journey, Amy tracks down the supposed killer, now revealed to be named Emmett Tucker. Emmett is described to us as a tall, skinny man who enjoys visiting a bakery frequently. His mobile home is located on the end of a long, narrow road, and most importantly, Emmett is stated to have been wrongfully accused of a kidnapping. Emmett's personality in the story matches very closely to the person we play as in Midnight Motorist. They're both easily disturbed and violent. There's even a whole part where Amy gets dragged and locked into Emmett's bathroom and has to escape through a window after attacking him. The entirety of Find Player 2 just has a plethora of themes that link back to everyone's favorite little minigame. There's a part of the story where Amy puts on specifically a yellow sweater. Amy's friend Greta is more level-headed and calm than Amy herself. Windows and rain are mentioned on several occasions. More importantly, when Amy escapes Emmett's bathroom and drives away as fast as she can, it immediately starts raining. Seems as if Scott wanted us to pay more attention to the rain in this part more than any other. We can also call out how when Amy's driving up to Emmett's house, it details how the road gets smaller, more narrow. There's even a part of the story where Emmett explains what he was doing at Freddy's when Amy and Mary Jo first ran into him, looking for his missing daughter, of which he specifically states, "Always liked going to that place." Sound familiar? I could go on and on about the plethora of connections I found while reading this story, and how it all connects back to Midnight Motorist. Now comes my big claim. What is Midnight Motorist about? I believe that Midnight Motorist is about one of the MCI victims' parents getting out of trial after being wrongfully convicted of being the murderer. Now, yes, this is a big claim, but hear me out. This would explain the purple car, being that they aren't Afton, and Scott wanted to convey that they were convicted for the murders, how everyone thought they were Afton. Though he probably thought to the player it would obviously not be Afton if the person we played as stepped out of the vehicle as yellow and not purple. We can say this is the case by looking at older instances of Afton's slaughtermobile, how in the FNAF 2 minigame Take Cake, we can see this purple car people are so reliant on, and how when Afton steps out, he's clearly purple. People have tied this to the possibility of this being before the murders, before Afton took on a lifelong journey of killing kiddos and huffing Remnant, but if that were the case, it wouldn't make much sense due to the purple guy persona being seen all the way back in FNAF 4. You could say that the FNAF 4 minigames take place after the murders, but that's a different theory for another day. Also, fun fact, a quick Google search can tell you the opposite of purple is yellow. Strange how some things just start falling into place, huh? If the person we were playing as had been tried for seemingly being the murderer of the MCI victims, wouldn't that make sense for why they aren't allowed in Juniors? Juniors isn't a Freddy's location, it's just some random bar or store that our character here frequents a lot, just like how Emmett frequents the bakery. Taking this into consideration, we can also determine that the most infuriating detail, the later that night, isn't talking about after Charlie's death, it's rather after the other kids were murdered. Notice how in the UCN high school cutscenes, the light outside switches from day to night, more specifically when Toy Chica is talking about breaking and entering. How Midnight Motorist uses the same rain asset as the security puppet minigame is likely an oversight by Scott, or, in this case, an undersight, as he probably saw no reason to make a completely new rain asset for a minigame that's in the same game. And from a game dev perspective, it wouldn't make much sense to do. Not every little detail is going to be for lore. Sometimes, Scott just needs to make it easier on himself. As we continue through Midnight Motorist, we come across a supposed dirt pile, which the Freddy Files mentions the possibility of it being an unmarked grave, but again, the Freddy Files aren't very reliable, and besides, this statement was made under fan theories, which means it's a theory, not a fact. I do not think, under any circumstances, this is a Funtime or Twisted animatronic, as even with this theory in mind, all, if not most, animatronics are nocturnal, so it definitely wouldn't be buried at the time Midnight Motorist takes place. There are probably endless possibilities to what this thing can be, but I believe this to just be what it is, a red herring. Just like the car, Rain, and Junior's, a simple dirt pile left out of the way. However, I would like to bring up that while discussing this theory, Joe brought up the possibility of the dirt pile being the place our mustard friend references when saying he ran off to that place again. Hence the reason they got out to check, to see if their kid was there. Though there is no strong evidence for me personally to believe that to be the case, so please take this as food for thought rather than a fact. I just want to bring up for fun that while developing this theory, in earlier stages, I recalled one of the high school cutscenes from UCN, and I had an idea. Toy Chica mentions that she's going to tell a boy his house is on fire, and in the sister location cutscenes with Immortal and the Restless, there is a house fire. So I originally thought this could be another instance of William luring an MCI victim, due to this plot being more than big enough for a house. Again, no real evidence, just more food for thought. Now, when we come to the end of the road and approach the infamous house that has posed a lot of questions, while not having any real evidence, I believe this person we see sitting in the chair to not be anyone of importance, and rather yet another red herring purposely trying to throw us off. There is no way Scott didn't put a person wearing a gray shirt watching TV in this minigame to not mess with us. While Scott has stressed how bad he wants us to figure out this story, it most likely will never stop him from messing with us a bit. Dude needs to have his fun after all. And like I mentioned earlier, the person we're playing as clearly has a short fuse, judging by the dialogue and also by their actions alone. Pounding on the door, the he will be sorry when he gets back. I feel as if this could be used as more evidence to support why fingers were being pointed at them when the MCI took place. They have a short temper and could possibly be abusive, similarly to Emmett in Find Player 2. Now, if we take a look out back, we see right off the bat, two large animalistic footprints standing outside, a trail of smaller footprints trailing off into the woods, and a broken window. As much as I could call out there being no glass on the floor outside, and that suggesting there being a force from outside that had broken the window, I feel like the answer we seek is a lot more simpler than that. I believe Afton did in fact break the window, grab the child, but he broke free and ran away. And considering how I believe our friend Mustard Man here is a parent of the MCI victim, you can probably assume William caught up. But there's only one issue with this. The footprints aren't approaching the window, they're just standing outside. And yes, while you could possibly use this as evidence, I believe it being in the same field as the glass being the answer. While you could use it as evidence, doesn't mean it is. This was likely an oversight by Scott, much like the rain. Why have multiple footprints when you could only have the one? He needs to get the point across, not show every little detail. There is one more argument to bring up, however, the fact it's raining outside. When spring locks get wet, they trip, which we literally see happen to Afton in the FNAF 3 cutscenes. There are three possible counters to this argument. Either Afton didn't wear a suit and instead the footprints we see are more metaphorical, just to show that Afton did kill the kid. Or it could just be that it wasn't raining when Afton showed up. Also, I'd like to bring up the more likely reason, Afton used one of the temporary suits mentioned in FNAF 3 instead to avoid getting caught in a failure.
There's been a slight change of company policy concerning use of the suit. Don't. After learning of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, the company has deemed the suit temporarily unfit for employees. Until replacements arrive, you will be expected to wear the temporary costumes provided to you. Keep in mind that they were found on very short notice, so questions about appropriateness/relevance should be deflected. As always, remember to smile. You are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Now that you've heard my talk, and I've tried to convey this mind-boggling minigame in the clearest way possible, Let's go through my final statement on the matter. What I believe to have happened is that Afton killed Charlie on a different day, making her his first victim. Then followed by Susie, making her the first of the MCI. He then killed 2 other children, the Midnight Motorist kid in question, then finally Cassidy. Earlier on, our Midnight Motorist family was at Freddy's, and the child was attempted to be lured by Afton, but refused, which caused Afton to go to the source itself. After spending the day at Freddy's with their child, our mustard parent receives a police interrogation at home, being in the location at the time of the first 3 missing kids' disappearances, and is taken into custody due to having an aggressive nature and a criminal record. While being arrested, they leave their child at home with possibly a relative or a friend. With the situation at hand getting worse and not having any real evidence, police send our mustard-colored parent home. In a heat of rage, the parent drives home, speeding down the road. Remember that criminal record I mentioned? They attempt to take a breather and go to their favorite bar, Junior's, just to have a couple drinks, but due to their connection to the ongoing MCI case, they aren't allowed in, which gives them a one-way ticket home. Arriving at their house, they enter it and immediately go for their child's room, blaming him for their interrogation. After all, they wouldn't have been at Freddy's if it weren't for him. The person tasked to watch the child was told what had happened to him while they were at Freddy's, telling the parent they had a rough day. Still enraged, our yellow parent tries to find a way inside the child's room from the back, walking out into the rain to get to him, only to find the window broken. Thinking their kid snuck out, the parent believes the kid snuck back to Freddy's, when in reality, he was taken back by the man who attempted to murder him early on. Wow. Who knew that a minigame that could be played in under a minute would be so hard to unpack? But I hope this helps people understand that when a minigame is shown in the franchise, it shouldn't be taken at face value. The minigames since the beginning of the franchise have been made metaphorical instances. I really hope no one watching this thinks Mangle canonically did backflips over a bald green shirt wearing toddler. Although, come to think of it, there have been stranger occurrences in Five Nights at Freddy's. And yes, while I obviously do believe my theory, it doesn't mean I think I'm 100% undoubtedly right. I think the story of FNAF is up for interpretation. I don't think there's any real right or wrong way to interpret things. Everyone thinks differently. But I knew when I crafted this theory, I stuck Five Nights gold. And I personally think it's the most satisfying way to explain Midnight Motorist. There might be some plot holes I'm missing and some things I'm misinterpreting. I don't know, and unfortunately I don't think anyone will except Scott. So unless the man comes out and says it himself, which I think it's easy to say that will never happen. But please, tell me your thoughts. Do you think I'm wrong or do you think I'm right? If so, please tell me why in the comments. I would love to spark more debates there. But with that being said, we too mistook one innocent grieving parent for the murder behind the MCI.